Hi everyone, I'm here today to talk to you about all of the books that I read in July. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 books to talk to you about. Though one of them is one I just wanted to mention because it was one I read earlier in the year, but it's coming out in August. So I just wanted to remind myself and also remind any of you who were interested when I talked about it the first time that that book is out imminently in the next week or so. I will list all of the titles in the description box in case that's helpful. And I always mention this at the beginning of the month, so just to quickly mention it now. But if you enjoy my content on here and you would like to throw $1 in the tip jar and support me over on Patreon, that would be amazing. I will leave a link in the description box down below where you can find out more if that tickles your fancy. If it doesn't, that's absolutely fine. So let us begin with thrillers. I read, I was gonna say 5, arguably 6. One of them is on the cusp of thrillery. So the first one was 3 Hours by Rosamund Lupton. And this was one I only bought last month, I think. And I think I mentioned in last month's haul video that I hadn't been planning on buying this book at all because I really enjoyed her first one, really didn't like her second book. I think there's one I haven't read. And then when I saw this, I just thought, well, maybe it was a bit of a one-hit wonder for me and we are not meant to be. But then Emma read it and loved it. And I'd heard other people saying great things about it. So I thought, you know what? I'll give it a go. This is about a school shooting, but it is set in the UK, and it was really good. It's not a favourite of mine, but it's definitely something that keeps you reading. Each section is so short, so you always just think just a little bit more, just a little bit more, and you're reading from the perspective of lots of different people, which I thought was the standout part of this book, because whenever I have read books about school shootings before, they tend to be from the point of view of one person and then maybe delving back into their past, so they're thinking about their lives while the events around them are unfolding. But in this, we go from several different children's perspectives to teachers' perspectives to parents waiting outside who know that the school is under siege. And I just thought that that made for such a tense read, because you would read from the point of view of parents who didn't know what was happening to their children, but you know as a reader what's happening to their children. And it was really just, I mean, it put me on edge at many different points. There's a lot of references to Macbeth in here, which I thought was very fun. There's also some kind of really deep, twisted irony to this book, in that this book talks about white supremacy. It deals a lot with white supremacy, and in the middle there are a series of quotes of real headlines of newspapers in the UK, primarily, you guessed it, from the Daily Mail and the Sun, inciting violence and in many ways encouraging white supremacy. I'm sure that they would say that they're not doing that, but that is exactly what they're doing, and showing the harmful impact of inciting violence like that. And then on the back of this book, we have a quote from the Daily Mail which says, "If you read only one thriller this year, make it this one. It is that good." And honestly, if that is not part of what is wrong with our world, then I don't know what is. I appreciate that lots of different people write for one particular paper, and one writer doesn't speak for every writer, but if a paper can like hold this book up and say, "Oh, this book is so brilliant, you should definitely read it," as though their hatred has been turned into some kind of art form which makes everything they say okay, that I think is a big discussion for another time. I just found that painfully ironic. And yeah, but the book itself is very good. Then I read 4 books by Nicci French. As I mentioned in a recent video, I am reading all of their books, and when I've read all of them, I will do an author spotlight where I say, I love these books, you should definitely check them out, this series is amazing. I personally didn't enjoy these ones so much, and then you can decide where you might want to delve into with their work, because they have published at least 25 different things. So I read 4 last month, and I had mixed feelings about them. So the book of theirs that I read last month that I absolutely loved, and is one of my favourite standalones that they've written, is called The Red Room. And I think I particularly love this one because it feels like a Frida Klein book. They wrote this right before they started writing the Frida Klein series. And I feel like the protagonist in this book, Kit Quinn, was a dry run for Frida, a dress rehearsal, because Kit is a psychologist, whereas Frida is a psychotherapist. Both of them enjoy walking along Regent's Canal, which you can see on the front here. There is a character in here that reminded me of Alan Decker, if you've read Blue Monday, and they both enjoy being in their cozy London homes. They want to cut themselves off from the world a little bit, but the world won't let them do that. Their friends won't let them do that. Their friends are always very present in a way that they love, but are also infuriated by. So there are lots of parallels, but the plots are very different. And Kit also is attacked at the beginning of this book. She's called to a police station. The police want her to do an assessment of a man that they've pulled in from the street. They think that he's done something. They're very suspicious of him. And Kit is frustrated because the police are not handling the situation properly. This man clearly needs help and compassion, not to be set upon by the law, and she makes that very clear. She's then attacked and she has a facial disfigurement, so there is great rep for disfigurement in here. And then she has to deal with the way her friends approach her about that, deal with society's ableist expectations of her after her attack. I thought all of that was handled brilliantly, and the whole mystery element of this book was so intriguing. This is a book that I think I will always remember for when I read it. I did a time and place book tag years ago now, but talking about books where you really remember where you were when you read them. And I had a hospital appointment at Moorfields a couple of weeks ago, and it was so hot. I knew that if I got on the tube wearing a mask to go to my hospital appointment, I would pass out because my body can't regulate its temperature. So I thought I will walk there in 32 degrees heat, 2 hour walk there, 2 hour walk back. No wig that day, just a headscarf and lots of water. It was not that fun, but I was listening to this while walking there and back, and that made the whole thing bearable. There was one point where I was walking along some parts of Regent's Canal, so that was a joy too. I love this, and if you have read the Frida Klein books and are grieving like me, I think this book is one that you would love. The other three that I read I didn't love as much. So this one is Until It's Over. It's about a woman called Astrid who is a courier. So she's cycling around London delivering parcels, and then she finds herself in this series of unfortunate events whereby she rocks up at someone's house and they've died, and the police think, you know, once is unfortunate, twice is a coincidence, 3 times what is going on and how are you involved? And she doesn't understand what's happening. She's trying to work it out. She lives in a flat share with people who you get to learn a lot about, and that's really interesting. The tension building is fun and I think works well, but then the second half of the book is told from the point of view of the killer, and it lost me, honestly, because the second half is the story of the first half but from his point of view, so you get the whole thing again. And I didn't think the payoff was worth it, you know, going through the whole narrative to get those small tidbits. It lost my interest, I have to say. So this one, not a favourite of mine by them. This one is Killing Me Softly, and it reminded me of their book Secret Smile, which I also didn't love as much. This one is about an abusive relationship, which Secret Smile is also about. And it may be because of that I didn't enjoy it as much. This is one of those books where you know that someone's done something and you know who that person is, and the whole book is about proving that they did that thing. There were some revelations in this that I found particularly interesting, but overall, on my list of favourites of theirs, it is I think very near the bottom. And then the last one I read by them this month was this one, which I loved up until the very end, and the ending just didn't satisfy me very much, which is a shame. And I think if an ending doesn't satisfy you with a thriller, it kind of taints the whole book a little bit. So this is What to Do When Someone Dies. It's about a woman called Ellie. The police come to her door one day and they say, your husband died. He was in a car crash. And also there was a woman in his car called Milena. Do you know who she is? And Ellie has never heard of Milena. And the police and Ellie's friends are convinced that her husband Greg must have been having an affair. And she just thinks that can't be true. They think she must be in denial. And she thinks, no, my husband was not having an affair. So she goes on this journey, this escapade to try and find out what happened. And she disguises herself as a woman called Gwen and goes to Milena's friends and integrates herself into their environment. And that was so tense, just her undercover and potentially running into people who may recognize her. I loved that bit of the book so much. I mean, it was really ridiculous. It was really ridiculous. And there were elements of that in Killing Me Softly as well, where the main character would go and investigate and pretend to be somebody else. And the amount of danger they were putting themselves in doing that were in both cases, in Killing Me Softly and in this one, my favorite parts of the book. Definitely preferred it to the two that I just spoke about, but not as much as The Red Room, but it was very fun. I think I said, if I remember correctly, that there was another book that is on the cusp of thriller that I read last month, and that was this one. This is The First Day of Spring by Nancy Tucker. I read Nancy's non-fiction book, The Time in Between, when it came out, which was 7 years ago. This is very different. It's a debut fiction book, and this is about a young girl called Chrissy, and it opens with her killing a 2-year-old boy. So she is a child herself, and she kills another child. So if that is something you don't want to read about, then don't pick this book up. I think it's good that that's at the very beginning, because you know exactly what you're getting. It is a heartbreaking story because it's about Chrissy, and obviously she's done this terrible thing, but she is neglected at home. She is emotionally abused by her mother, and she has this weird view of death because her mum has fed her so many manipulative lies. So her dad keeps leaving home, leaving her mother. Sometimes he's in jail, sometimes he's just left, he's an alcoholic. When he's home, she's really excited to see him, but she can also hear him attacking her mum. And whenever he leaves, her mum says to Chrissy, "Oh, your dad's dead," because she doesn't want to talk about him, she doesn't want to have to think about him, and that just means it's the end of the conversation. So Chrissy, in some part of her brain, thinks that if someone dies, they come back to life. So she kills this boy, in essence, to get attention, to take out this anger that she has on the world. And obviously that's awful, and I'm not taking anything away from that. It's absolutely horrific. But then she's perplexed because she's like, well, why isn't he coming back? Everyone's making such a fuss. He is going to come back. And then she slowly realized that this is not going to happen. And it was a really quite difficult read in places because of that. The narrative is split between Chrissy as a young girl and then also Julia, who is who she is as an adult. And we know, reading Julia's sections, so this is not a spoiler, right from the beginning, we know, reading Julia's sections, that Chrissy is arrested, or was arrested, and was sent to prison because of what she did. And now in her life as an adult with a child of her own, she has been released, she has been given a new name, she's trying to make a life for herself, but there are lots of things that encroach on her life from before, lots of trauma that she has experienced and also has inflicted on other people that have framed who she is as a person. And she is in this endless debate with herself as to whether or not she is good, can ever be good, can ever be redeemed, and if not, is that okay? I did think that some sections of this book could have been stripped back a bit. I did feel like it wandered a little bit, could have been tighter, but I did think that the themes in this book were brilliantly explored. Chrissy is obviously a really dislikable character, and it was reminiscent of a lot of John Burnside characters, really, really cruel children and complicated children who also say horrible things about people with disfigurements and are very fat phobic, and they're just taking their rage out on the world. So if you do not want to read dislikable characters, if you do not want to read about children murdering children, then this is not for you. But if you're interested in picking up a book that has a very complex character arc, then this one is maybe one that you would like to check out. Then I read The Little White Horse, which I spoke about in a reading vlog. I was reading books that had been recommended to me by other people, by other booktubers, and Jean had gifted this book to me a while ago. I enjoyed reading this. I spoke about it in that video. I didn't love it as much as I would have done had I read it as a child. I didn't have any nostalgia to attach to it, but I did enjoy it. Another book I read in that vlog, which I will link down below if you want to go and hear my thoughts, was Love in Colour by Bolu Babalola, and I wasn't enjoying it in that video, and it was entirely my fault. I don't really enjoy books that are about relationships, and thinking about it, that may be why the Nicci French ones that I don't love as much are the ones I don't love as much, because they're normally focused on a marriage. But at least in those cases there's murder, and I am interested in murder. I'm not interested in the lovey-dovey stuff, and this has quite a lot of insta-love in it because it is retellings of myth and fairy tales, and those are obviously rife with that. I'm more into the dark, horrible fairy tales instead of the love fairy tales. So I am going to read more of these and see if I bond with other stories in the book, but I haven't yet done that, so I haven't finished it. So I'm carrying this one over into August. I'm also carrying over Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake, which is a non-fiction book about fungi, which I am really enjoying. I still can't get over this cover. It's so beautiful. Also can't get over his name. It's amazing. Did you know that 60% of all enzymes in industry are made from fungi? Did you know that 15% of all vaccines are made using yeast, which is fungi? Did you know that Neanderthals probably understood, or at least had suspicions about mushrooms and fungi that contain antibiotic properties, because Neanderthal man was discovered with a tooth abscess who had been eating a certain mushroom that has that property? Very interesting. So many facts in this book. Enjoying it. It is very, very beautifully written, and I will speak about it more at the end of August once I have finished reading it. I also have other books on my currently reading pile, which, to be honest, is getting out of control. Books from before July. So I may do a themed reading vlog at some point where I aim to get through all of the currently reading books on my bedside table, because it's getting to that stage where it's starting to get me down a little bit. Last month I also read this graphic novel, which is called The Witch Boy by Molly Knox Ostertag. This I would recommend for fans of Kay O'Neill, and also the graphic novel The Prince and the Dressmaker. This is about a society where women grow up to be witches and men grow up to be shapeshifters, and society doesn't allow for anything in between. No blurred lines, please. But Aster is a boy who longs to be a witch, who feels like he is a witch, and he is very much judged and shunned for that, but maybe his magical powers could save the day. This is a great book to give to kids, to get them to think about gender norms and conforming to what society expects of people's gender and sexuality. It's great. I thought it was lovely. I don't think that the art style is as beautiful as things like the Tea Dragon Society, but the colour palette is still lovely. Trying not to show you spoilers. I did like the colour palette in there. A book that was a disappointment for me last month was The Woman in the Purple Skirt by Natsuko Imamura, and this is translated from the Japanese by Lucy North. It sounded like it was going to be a little bit like Lullaby by Leila Slimani, and in fact there is a quote by Leila Slimani on the front. It's narrated by a woman called the Woman in the Yellow Cardigan, and she is obsessed with a woman that she calls the Woman in the Purple Skirt. And the woman in the purple skirt is in and out of employment and always sits on the same bench in the park, and is teased by the local children because she'll never speak to people. So, you know, they'll run up and tap her on the shoulder and run away. And the woman in the yellow cardigan thinks that that's terrible of them to do it, and she wants to save the woman in the purple skirt. So she leaves a job advertisement on the bench so that the woman will see it, for the place where she works, so that she will get to observe her on a day-to-day basis. And I was just hoping it was going to escalate into something, because it is very bizarre, and it does, I would say, feel more like Notes on a Scandal by Zoe Heller, which is one of my favourite books ever, but I just didn't feel like it ever went anywhere. Stuff does happen towards the end, but not enough, I think, for the amount of tension that was building. It kind of all just felt a bit at the end. I felt like this could have been an amazing short story. I didn't feel like it warranted this amount of pages, unfortunately, so it was a bit of a disappointment for me. Books that were not disappointments. This is Small Bodies of Water by Nina Mingya Powles. I've read everything that Nina has written. She's also written a non-fiction book called Tiny Moons, as well as a poetry collection called Magnolia, and she had an essay about wild swimming in the essay collection that Daunt Books published about the Hampstead Ladies Pond. And I think that was the first thing of hers that I ever read. And this definitely, book's falling over, this definitely is in the same vein of that essay. In fact, that essay is in here. And then also there were definitely themes from her other books that appear in here as well. I didn't mind that. It felt almost familiar when reading her work instead of, repetitive. I just really love the way that she writes. This is a book about wild swimming. It is about growing up in New Zealand and being mixed race, and then also moving to London. It's about experiencing racism. It is about painful periods. It is about food. This book made me hungry, just like Tiny Moons made me hungry. And the way that she uses colour when talking about anything is so stunning. She links swimming to talking about pain. She says, "It is easiest for me to talk about pain using the language of waves. Deep water waves are composed of multiple waves of different lengths, formed in deep bodies of water where there are no nearby shorelines to provide resistance. The energy force that propels them is wind. The pain is the colour of raspberry sorbet, which is the colour of the inside of a person's mouth." And that reminded me of Josie George's book, Still Life, which came out earlier this year, where she was likening pain to the weather and how pain weathers the body. And I just think both of those extended metaphors are really brilliant. At one point in the book, after experiencing a racist incident, she talks about gardening and plants, and she's specifically talking about nyctinastic movement, which is where flowers close at night, and scientists aren't sure exactly why plants do that, why they don't just stay open, but she is referring to herself as that plant and wanting to kind of curl back in on herself for protection, go home, hide away, and then come back out again into the world. And again, that extended metaphor was just really, really beautiful. It is a stunning book that I would recommend to pretty much everybody, I think. I mean, come on, at one point she's talking about a specific kind of vegetarian funeral banquet in China where tofu is often given as an offering because it is soft enough to be swallowed by a ghost. I mean, it's just full of great things like that. I absolutely adored it. Another book that I loved was this poetry pamphlet by Hannah Hodgson called Where I'd Watch Plastic Trees Not Grow. This is published by Verve. I've also read her pamphlet Dear Body, and she has a full-length collection coming out next year, I think with Seren. So this is about her experience of being in a hospice and having palliative care, being someone who has a long-term illness, is disabled. I am always here for Hannah's poetry because it is just fantastic. And I think my favourite in here was called, actually there were two I think that I've marked. Yeah, okay, so I think my favourite was one called Bad News, which goes, "Doctors transform into poets as they deliver bad news, declining another step in the wrong direction, no more invasive tests, sick enough to die, a flower waiting in a vase or a wick burning too quickly. They reposition the tissue box, crack a joke before dismantling my world. There's no easy way to say this." And some of that is in italics, signifying the words that the doctors are saying. And I love this idea of doctors turning into poets when they deliver bad news, as if they need to deliver bad news in a certain way. They're trying to elevate that bad news. They are trying to be poetic or emotional about it. And the italics used reflect that, because it is formatted like a poem, those specific words, with slashes which would indicate a line break, but would also indicate broken up speech or fragments where they're falling over their words. And the italics also indicate the tilting of the head, which lots of people often do if they're speaking to disabled people or if they are delivering bad news. So that is acknowledging the difficult job that doctors have, but also the ableism within the medical world, and how their words are dismantling her world as they try and put this poem together for her. And the last line is, "There's no easy way to say this," and that is in italics, implying it's something the doctors are saying, but it also feels like something the poet is saying too. Like, there is no easy way to deliver this poem. For me as a poet to deliver bad news about myself to the reader, because it's like she has become the doctor, who is in turn being a poet, who has to pass on this bad news to someone else. I just thought it's really effectively and simply done, but there's lots of things to dissect within the poem itself. So I would definitely recommend checking out Hannah's work. What else do we have here? Oh yeah, this is the one that I wanted to remind you of very briefly. I read this earlier in the year. It's a proof copy. Mine is covered in foundation for some reason and pen. This is Ill Feelings by Alice Hattrick, which is being published this month, so in August. That's the month that we're in. And this is Alice writing about her experience of having ME and her mother's experience of having ME. And then she delves into the history of ME. How many times can I say ME? And how it has appeared at various different times in history, and doctors always give it a different name. There was an outbreak of what looks like it was ME after polio, for instance. And how now there is another outbreak of, in this case, long COVID, which has many similarities with ME, and how the medical industry is always so dismissive of these things, doesn't collate all the data, and therefore can't actively help people as much as they can. It reminded me, this is not really relevant, but it just made me think of how police stations used to work back in the day. You know, they would deal with the crimes in their own jurisdictions, and they wouldn't share data with other counties, or in the case of America, with other states, which meant that serial killers could kill people in different states and patterns were missed because police didn't talk to each other. It feels like that with doctors. Doctors are not speaking to each other about all of these different conditions that could easily be the same condition, or at least share lots of similarities, which would make it easier to fight against those things and help people. It's frustrating. I really enjoyed the book. I would recommend it. A novel that I enjoyed, but I had hoped to love it more than I did, is Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen. This is a new release. I think it came out in July. Yeah. This is very funny in places, and it did remind me, I think, of Fleabag. It does say that, I think, somewhere, that is like Fleabag, or at least on the press release, I think it referenced Fleabag, and I thought, yeah, sure, whatever. But actually, it did remind me of that. Kind of that mixed with Sally Rooney. It's very dark comedy, very dark comedy. So this is Gilda, and she is having lots of panic attacks, and she keeps going to A&E because she thinks she's going to die. And people in A&E are very dismissive of her because she goes there all the time, and they think, you know, okay, how are you feeling? Okay, great, we'll refer you to a psychiatrist. And they just either never do, or the system is so broken that she never gets that referral. And that in turn lent her to have more anxiety and more panic attacks. So when she's leaving the hospital one day, she runs into someone who gives her a flyer for free therapy, and it's at the local church. So she goes there in order to get the therapy, but when she gets there, the vicar instead thinks that she's there to apply for a job because there is a vacancy for a receptionist because the receptionist there recently died, and she just can't bear to be not polite and tell him that that's not why she's there. So she says, yes, I am here for the job, and then just accepts the job and takes it. So she is a lesbian working in a Catholic church, and no one knows that she is gay, and she is worried that they're going to discover that, but also at the same time being, you know, proud of who she is. She's just kind of observing her life as this ridiculous thing that's happening to her and not having much agency herself. So there are funny elements to that, but obviously mentally she's going through a lot. Her family is also going through a lot. Her brother is an alcoholic as far as she is concerned, and her parents will not help him because they don't want to be confronted with anything hard as far as they're concerned. Everything is fine, and if anyone says that things are not fine, they are the problem. Yeah, it's funny, but also if you scrape the funniness off the surface, you get to something really quite depressing. So it is a bit of a ride reading that. The ending did make me cry. Overall, I think I just found this a little bit of an uneven read, but I would recommend it. If the premise sounds like it would entice you, then I would give it a go and see what you think. And then finally, I read 2 picture books last month. This is Home Alone by Barbara Nascimbeni, and it's essentially, you know, it's not like the film Home Alone, but it is about a dog that is home alone and what that dog would get up to. And I think this is a theme that has been explored in lots of picture books, and also there are films about this, so I didn't feel like it was particularly unique, but I did think that it was charming and funny, and that the illustrations are really lovely. Something that endeared me the most, I think, is that the dog hangs out with his friends online, and the dog that he's hanging out with is called Lola, and I just thought that was very lovely. So they wreak havoc together, but then obviously everything's very tidy by the time that his owners get home. However, a picture book that I absolutely adored last month is this one here called Never Not Ever by Beatrice, Alemagna, and I've read all of her books. She wrote The Fluffy Squishy Itty Bitty and a couple of other ones. They're all brilliant. She is an Italian writer and illustrator. This is translated into English by Jill Davis, I think, and this is about a little bat called Pascaline who really doesn't want to go to school. Never, not ever. And when her parents try and make her go to school, she says, no, never, not ever. And she shouts so loudly that her parents become so small and she's so pleased with herself because she can pick them up with her hands, this lovely little bat called Pascaline. And she says, all right, I'm going to have to take you with me to school then. So she tucks them into her pocket and she takes her parents to school. And she's so thrilled because she thinks that she's won because she's got to take her parents with her. She's not alone in school, but her parents are whispering and causing mischief, and she's just super embarrassed that her parents are there. So obviously by the end, the lesson is that the next day she's absolutely fine to go to school by herself. Thank you very much. She doesn't need her parents there to hold her hand. But it is so delightful. The end papers just show how expressive Beatrix has drawn Pascaline. And I think this one is one of my favourite drawings, where it says Pascaline knows what she likes. She no school. Not ever. And she's just sitting here with her cup of tea looking really smug, like, I'm never going to go to school. And this just gives me, you know, Yoda vibes with the cup of tea. I love it. So this one, brilliant. Highly recommend. It's out in September, I think. I'm definitely going to be giving a copy of that to my niece. So those are all the books that I read in July. A good reading month. Some books I really loved, some not so much, but you know, you got to read some not so great ones in order to unearth the really great ones, so that is okay. I would love to know what you read in July. Let me know in a comment down below. Let me know if you're interested in reading any of these, or if you have read any of them, because I would like to know that too. I hope you're having a good week, and I will be back soon with another video. Sending love. Bye.